Hello again. I'm sure that viewers have noticed the fuss which regularly erupts these days if a heterosexual person is cast in a film as a homosexual, or as we saw recently with Helen Mirren, someone who is not Jewish plays the part of a Jew. It is suggested that such things were as offensive as white people blacking up to play Africans. It seems that in the future only homosexuals will be able to portray a homosexual in a film or play, just as only Jews will be able to play the part of a Jew, and so on. This trend is now spreading into literature, and the suggestion is being made increasingly that nobody but a black person should include black characters in their novels, and that this is no more than another form of blackface. It's cultural appropriation. The implications of all this are horrifying and likely to cause dreadful harm to creative writing in Britain. It is just as well that this idea was not around in the 1950s and 1960s. Otherwise, one of the greatest American novelists of all time, who may be seen in the thumbnail to this video, would have been in terrible trouble. James Baldwin wrote some of the most celebrated American novels of the post-war years, including, of course, Giovanni's Room. The protagonist of this novel is David, a white man. Baldwin writes as easily of the character and mind of a white man as he does black people. He includes women as characters and explores their psychology and motivation. He explores the motivation of heterosexuals, homosexuals, black people, white people. He was a novelist, and that's one of the things that made him a great novelist. Today, of course, all this is viewed as unacceptable. I'm always irritated when I see James Baldwin's novels in a special section in bookshops for black writers or for homosexuals. He's a great writer in English, perhaps the greatest American novelist since the war. To stick him in a literary ghetto because of his ethnicity or sexuality is just awful. This then is how fiction is being seen now, something in which white people must write only about white characters, and only a homosexual can include a gay person in a novel. More and more black people are demanding novels which reflect their lives, as it is said, and I find this utterly bizarre. To give one example, a book called Act Your Age, Eva Brown, written by a black woman called Talia Hibbert, is in the New York Times bestseller list. This has caused great excitement among black people who are now saying that they wish to see more books with black protagonists written by black authors. One black critic wrote of the book, "It is really important to be able to see yourself and understand that you are not invisible." This seems to me to be nonsense and likely to harm the very idea of fiction. I have read many novels. I like reading novels. I'm a white man from a working class background in East London and Essex, but I don't in general want to read novels about white men from the East End. I know all about that. Instead, I read War and Peace and try and imagine what it must have been like to be a Russian nobleman in the early 19th century. I read James Baldwin's books so that I can try and imagine how it must have been to be a homosexual American in Paris in the 1950s. In other words, I read novels to try and expand my mental horizons, not constrict them to people just like me from the same country and the same class. Why would I want to do that? Just as I object strongly to seeing such a great writer as James Baldwin tucked away in a special category as a black writer or a gay writer, so too I regard the prospect of all authors being compelled to write only about people of their own background, sexuality and ethnicity as disastrous. Eyebrows are being raised now even at middle class people imagining working class characters and putting them in their books, and I've heard this described as unacceptable. If this continues, then fiction will be horribly impoverished, and talented writers will not dare explore other worlds or imagine anything different from their own personal experience. I can think of nothing more damaging for the future of literature in this country.